Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at a horse whose career is, well, it's less a story of pure domination and more a study in these agonizing, sort of spectacular near misses.
That's it, exactly.
Our sources really give us a great shortcut into the legacy of Air Shakur, a name that, for Japanese racing fans, it just evokes so much. We're talking talent, temperament, and this crushing weight of expectation.
That's the mission right there. I mean, if you want to understand the complex narratives in Japanese classic racing, Air Shakur is just central. He's the definitive volatile star.
The two-crown genius, they called him.
Right, and we've synthesized a lot of excerpts detailing that fiery personality, his defining races, which were just heart-stopping, and the really complicated meaning of his legacy today.
And what truly defines this deep dive, I think, is the paradox at the heart of it all. Air Shakur isn't famous for winning the Triple Crown. He's famous for coming within an almost unimaginable margin of it.
7 centimeters.
7 centimeters. It's less than the width of a soda can. And that tiny gap, it basically became the measure of his whole career.
It did. It's an incredibly dramatic story. So we're working through sources that cover everything from his blue blood pedigree and the specific dangerous nature of his personality. Right through that intense 3-year-old campaign, the risky decisions his team made, and his unfortunate early end.
Okay, let's unpack this from the beginning then. Air Shakur was foaled in 1997, and the pedigree was completely elite, just designed for greatness.
Oh, absolutely. His sire was the legendary Sunday Silence, who was, well, he was arguably the most dominant stallion in Japanese history. His dam sire was well decorated. He was stamped as special from the get-go.
And this is where the trouble starts, right?
This is where the trouble starts. The sources consistently emphasized that while he had all the physical attributes of a champion, his personality was immediately a problem. He wasn't just fast. He was fiercely temperamental.
And dangerous, frankly.
Frankly, dangerous to work with.
Yeah, it wasn't that sort of spit and vinegar attitude you sometimes get with a competitive colt. This was something deeper.
It was deep-seated volatility. I found those anecdotes from the training track particularly revealing. The sources talk about the sheer difficulty of just handling him.
The story about drawing lots.
Exactly. That riders, even seasoned professionals, often had to draw lots to decide who would have to risk getting on his back for morning work.
That's incredible. That kind of internal chaos has to be so taxing on a stable. It speaks to a horse that needed constant psychological management just to operate.
At a basic level, yeah, let alone compete at the highest tier. And the name, Air Shakur. His owner reportedly based it on the rapper Tupac Amaru Shakur.
The rebellious rapper.
Right. It wasn't just cool branding. It really reflected that wild, untamed spirit. He truly embodied the name.
His main jockey, the great Utaka Take, even said something about it, didn't he?
He did. He joked publicly that he'd love to look inside Shakur's head just to understand what was going on in there.
When your Hall of Fame rider is joking about needing brain surgery to figure out his horse, you know you've got a problem.
Absolutely. But despite all that baggage, the talent was just undeniable. As a 2-year-old, he won his maiden, he won the Hopeful Stakes.
Then he ran second in the Yayo Show, which is a key prep race, so he was proving he was ready for the classics.
He was. And he delivered in that first major test, the Satsuki Show.
The Satsuki Show, which is the Japanese 2,000 guineas, that's the speed test over 2,000 meters. And winning that, it confirmed him as an elite star.
But it also just ramped up the pressure for the next target.
The Japanese Derby.
And that Derby, the Tokyo Yushun, that's where Air Shakur really transitions from just being a star prospect to, well, a historical figure.
The pressure on Utaka Take must have been immense.
Yeah.
He was chasing a 3rd straight Derby victory.
Unprecedented. And Air Shakur, he enters the stretch. He surges clear, and for a brief, intoxicating moment,
it looks over.
The race looked completely over.
And this is where the sources just dedicate so much space. Because that brief lead immediately set up one of the most famous stretch duels in the race's history.
Oh, yeah. Air Shakur was challenged furiously on the outside by a horse called Agnes Flight.
And Agnes Flight had his own powerful narrative going on.
A huge narrative. He was ridden by Kawachi, who was chasing his very first Derby win. And it would have completed a 3-generation family dream of winning a classic.
So it wasn't just 2 horses. It was a clash of destinies.
It really was. With the Triple Crown on the line for Air Shakur.
They hit the wire together, the crowd erupts, and then just silence.
That photo finish review felt like it lasted forever.
It felt like an eternity, with everyone just waiting for the verdict that would basically define the rest of Air Shakur's life.
And the decision came down.
Agnes flight. By 7 centimeters. I mean, think about that for a moment.
Yeah, it's agonizing. In a race run over 2.5 kilometers, the difference comes down to a margin that's it's barely wider than a car key. It's just brutal. And it wasn't just a loss. It was the immediate, definitive end of that Triple Crown dream.
And the sources emphasize this so much, while the race itself became immortal, considered one of the greatest derbies ever.
Air Shakur walked away with a new title, a really painful one.
The horse who came closest to the Triple Crown without winning it.
The talent required to be defeated by that tiny margin is astonishing. But in racing, near perfection often just translates to disappointment.
And having tasted that failure, the team responded with a really ambitious, almost desperate gamble.
They did. They chose to ignore the final domestic classic, the St. Leger, and instead ship him immediately across the world.
To England.
To England for the King George VI and Queen Elizabeth Stakes. This is the summer showpiece over 2,400 meters. A massive international commitment.
It felt like a statement. Like, if he can't win the Derby, maybe he can conquer the world.
That was the idea. But it was an enormous risk, especially for a horse with his temperament.
And there, he met the sobering reality of international competition.
He met a horse named Umamusume, who was an absolute machine. Air Shakur finished 5th. Respectable, but
nowhere near the winner.
Not even close. And the loss itself was almost secondary to the effect of the journey, wasn't it?
It seems like it. The sources suggest that the overseas challenge took a really heavy toll.
It did. The sources note he came back to Japan looking tired, edgy, and slightly off balance. That immense pressure, the travel, the change in routine, it seemed to just re-aggravate that delicate balance of his personality.
And you see the direct consequence of that in his prep race for the final classic, the Kobe Shimbunhai.
He completely underperformed there. Finished 3rd, lost momentum. He was physically drifting wide. It looked like the volatility had finally just destroyed his confidence.
It looked bleak.
It looked very bleak. But then came the final classic, the Kikusho, the Japanese St. Leger. And this is the ultimate test of endurance, a run over 3,000 meters.
A massive distance, especially for a horse whose pedigree leaned more towards speed and power.
So not only was he physically and mentally exhausted from the trip, he was heading into a race that was, fundamentally against his natural style.
How do they pull that off?
This race, the Kikusho, this is where you really see the genius of Yutaka Take. He knew he couldn't fight the horse over that stamina-sapping distance.
So he worked with the volatility?
He worked with it. He kept Air Shakur calm, conserved every single ounce of energy by saving ground on the inner rail, and just waited.
Until the final moment.
Yes. In the stretch, the field spread out and a narrow gap opened up along the rail. Take seized the opportunity, urged Air Shakur through that tiny space.
And he found another gear.
The horse, drawing on every last reserve of his class, just surged to victory. It was a tactical masterpiece.
What a moment of redemption. That victory secured his 2nd classic crown, confirming him as a 2-crown genius.
And sealing that near Triple Crown status, he'd won 2 legs, missed the 3rd by a hair, and then conquered the 3,000-meter test nobody thought he could handle.
It should have cemented his status as a legend.
It should have. But the high was very short-lived. The final act of the season, the Japan Cup, where he faced older, established champions.
Like Team M Opera.
Exactly. And it was a crushing disaster. Air Shakur finished 14th.
And the sources make it clear that the physical and mental stress of that entire season, the Derby, the travel, the St. Leger, it had all finally caught up with him.
It had. But this is where the deeper historical analysis comes in. Because Air Shakur finishing 14th was terrible, but critically his main domestic rivals.
Agnes Flight, the others.
Agnes Flight, Eagle Cafe, Silk Prima Donna, they also finished right near the bottom of the field with him.
So what does that widespread failure imply for racing historians? What's the takeaway?
Well, if you connect the dots, it suggests that critics didn't just question Air Shakur. They started to question the quality of the entire 2000 classic generation.
Oh, wow.
And suddenly, that label of near Triple Crown horse started to sound less like high praise and more like, well, an insult, an indictment of the whole era.
That's a massive psychological blow. A horse who just won 2 classics suddenly has his achievements discounted because of the perceived weakness of his peers.
All based on a single race against older, proven champions.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that narrative really colored his older horse years. As a 4- and 5-year-old, the volatility and the lack of winning consistency became the dominant storyline.
He ran well, but the wins just became incredibly rare.
And he was constantly running into the reigning titan, TM Opera, who was just dominating the scene at the time.
That rivalry provides perfect context, really. TM Opera was the generational champion that Air Shakur just couldn't quite catch.
He couldn't. The sources detail how Air Shakur would constantly face him in major races, taking narrow defeats in high-level G2 events. He managed a respectable fourth in a major G1, the Takarazuka Kinnan. But the sheer grind of racing without consistently winning, it took its toll.
And the frequent jockey changes probably didn't help.
Not at all. For a horse so high-strung, that lack of consistency in the saddle must have just compounded his issues. It was a cycle of frustration.
So eventually they retired him.
They did. After an unremarkable performance in the Arima Kinnan, Air Shakur was retired from racing. He only really competed at that highest level for 3 brief seasons. He burned incredibly bright, but not for very long.
And the tragedy only deepened after retirement. We often assume these horses get a peaceful second career, but for Air Shakur, it wasn't to be.
No, his life was cut short far too soon. In March of 2003, at the incredibly young age of 6, he suffered a catastrophic fracture in a simple pasture accident.
And had to be euthanized.
He did, a brief life, ending so abruptly.
And what does that mean for his legacy as a stallion?
Unfortunately, a very thin mark on the breed. He only left behind 4 foals, and they were all fillies. So while the bloodline survives faintly through them, the direct male line is almost certainly not continuing. His impact is historic, not genetic.
So we arrive back at that central debate that fans still argue about today. Why did a horse so undeniably talented never fully dominate? Was it the temperament, the risky overseas travel, the constant change in jockeys, or just bad timing?
And the beauty of the story is that the source material doesn't give us one clean answer. That ambiguity is why he's still so compelling. He was defined by intensity and by the closest margin of failure you can imagine.
His achievements are undeniable. 2 classics, one of the greatest derbies ever.
But the context keeps shifting. He wasn't a failure. He was a symbol of unfulfilled brilliance, a reminder that genius isn't always neat or comfortable. He lived right on the edge, emotionally, physically, and historically.
He was one moment, one stride away from perfection.
He became something much more intriguing than a perfect winner. The 7-centimeter genius. The winner of that derby, Agnes Flight, he achieved immortality. But it's Air Shakur who fuels the most passionate arguments among racing fans today.
It forces you to consider this. When we measure potential against absolute perfection, whose story is more compelling? The winner who crosses the finish line, or the nearly perfect runner-up who is just 7 centimeters from immortality, forever carrying the story of what might have been?
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more.